Okay, that's now live.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the January meeting of the Communities and Partnerships Committee. I would like to begin by welcoming those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Members, you are by now aware of the need to keep your video camera switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep your microphones muted, except when I invite you to speak. Please click the raised hand function if you wish to ask a question or comment. There is always a risk we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do so. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address the fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such time as it can be reconvened. Can I remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded? So before I undertake a roll call, Nick, do we have any apologies for absence, please?
Thanks, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Sanderson, and Councillor Simone Taylor is here as his substitute.
Thank you very much. So now, members, I'll begin by calling the names of all members on the committee. To establish your presence, please confirm your presence. Councillor Ashwood.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Batchelor.
Present.
Councillor Costello.
Present.
Councillor Every.
Present.
Councillor French.
Present.
Councillor Machini.
Present.
Councillor Nieto.
Present.
And Councillor Simone Taylor, substituted for Councillor Sanderson.
Present.
Welcome, Simone. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Councillor Smith.
Present, Chairman.
And myself, Councillor Criswell. We move on to declarations of interest. Do any members wish to declare a disclosable pecuniary interest or a non-statutory disclosable interest? Please show if you do. I see no one raising their hand, so we'll assume there's no interest to declare. Thank you very much. So we move on to item 2, minutes of the meeting held on the 3rd of December. We're now being asked to approve the minutes of the meeting as a correct record. Can I ask, please, if any member disagrees with this proposal or has anything they wish to raise?
Can I just abstain because obviously wasn't here? So.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. So no objections. So we'll take those minutes as approved. Thank you very much, everybody. So we move on to item 2B, and we have Service Director Adrian Chapman here just to provide any updates. Over to you, Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, committee. No significant updates to the action log as published, other than to point out that action 328, the hate crime update, the action log says that that is included in the committee report. In fact, to make sure we've got the most comprehensive data, I've asked Rob Hill to join us today, Chair, through you, to update us when we get to that part of my Service Director report. Thank you.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you very much indeed. Any questions on the action log, members? Please show. I see no one showing, so thank you very much. We'll move straight on to the first substantive item, which is the monthly report of the service from our Service Director, Adrian Chapman. Welcome, Adrian, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. So as is now traditional, my Service Director report this month falls into 2 halves, but actually has some additionality as well. So we've got the traditional COVID response update for you, and also some business as usual updates. And there are other officers on the meeting today that may be able to add any detail or respond to any questions if I can't. But also, and I really wanted to focus first of all on section 2.2, which is a really important part of the report for me this month, and also for our chair. And this details or sets out a proposition to really significantly focus on the theme of social mobility. And I just wanted to spend a bit of time trying to expand on why that is really important right now, and why the time feels right now to do this work. So social mobility, this committee has been responsible for some time, and we've had a cross-party working group that's been in existence now for 18 months or more. And probably fair to say, and this is very much about me being critical of myself and the approach that we've taken as officers, progress hasn't been as significant as perhaps we would have liked, and there are various reasons why that is the case. And we could continue with the approach we're taking, which is to develop an annual action plan to focus in on 3 or 4 issues and to report that through committee via the cross-party workshop. But through discussion with the chair and I, and really we took the opportunity over Christmas to effectively provide a bit of a reset in our thinking. We think that there are so many people that have been adversely affected by COVID that actually the problems that we were and are still trying to resolve through the social mobility work are likely to be worsened as a consequence. At the moment, we're still dealing obviously with the pandemic, but we know, for example, and the committee is well aware of the number of people that are likely to lose their jobs or already have lost their jobs. We're likely to see communities become fragmented as people become more and more isolated. And on the theme of isolation, we know that a lot of people who have been at home, either because they can't go into work or because they have to shield or are particularly vulnerable, are starting to show signs, not in certainly every case, but many cases of the effects of that, the negative effects of that on their mental health and well-being. And we figure that there isn't really another committee or another directorate within our organisation that has a better overview of what's going on out there than this one. And unless and until we take responsibility holistically for addressing those challenges, both for our own directorate and our committee's work, for the whole council and also for our whole system, we think that gap between those that have and those that have not will continue to worsen. And, you know, we all want, don't we, the best for our county and for our residents. So for that reason, we are proposing a wholesale focus, a serious focus on social mobility as the raison d'etre for the service directorate's work and for the bulk of the committee's work. It means that we don't want this to be just about theory or principle. We want this to be about practice and practical intervention. The test for me, and I think for our chair as well when we've discussed it, is that we want to be able to knock on the door of anybody that, when we can of course, that is facing some form of inequality or challenge as a consequence of COVID, and be able to say to them, these are the practical things that we as a county council, but also our partners can do to provide practical support to get that person back on a steady path and one towards affluence. And social mobility is about economic inequality, but it's also about health and well-being inequalities. It's about the experiences one's had in one's life and the experience of previous generations, and essentially is about trying to improve the outcomes for people across all sorts of domains. So we want to be able to say to anybody facing a situation of crisis in their lives that we're here and we can do some really positive things with them. It's important as well for me that this isn't just about COVID. So I think what COVID has done is really shone a light on the challenges that we are seeing in some of our communities and some of our residents. And it has and will worsen, I think, the gap between the people that are doing well and those that are doing less well. But we also know that we've got those inequalities already embedded across our county, and we've spent a lot of time as a committee discussing parts of our county where we need to pay more attention and develop better interventions that really meet the needs of those people. So this is about getting under the skin once and for all of those deeply entrenched situations that people are facing where they're just really struggling, and accepting that that's the reality and trying to put in place some really practical measures. And I said at the start that I think our time is right, and I think that's for a number of reasons, but most notably, it is about the response we've managed to achieve through the pandemic. And through this committee's leadership, we've formed, I think, some amazing sets of responses that have pulled together the collective strength of the partnerships within which we operate. At our community resilience group meeting on Tuesday this week, there were 44 partners represented, And they've, as I reported before, they've continued to commit to that group week on week, and that it continues to grow. And if you look at the representation around the table, every one of our residents will be represented in some way by at least one of those organisations, and that's an incredible amount of resource. I think that now, under kind of a really focused effort around social mobility and tackling economic hardship, I think we can make some incredible inroads. So the approach is really designed to think about 3 tiers of support. The first is to get our own service directorate aligned to this agenda, and making sure that everything we do across the service directorate is supporting the principles of social mobility and improving people's outcomes. We've then got a focus, I think, on the rest of the county council. So what is the rest of this council doing to support that agenda? And can we make sure we're bending as much as we can to doing that work? And then the third tier for me is about harnessing the capacity of that community resilience group and our wider partnership. If members are minded to support this approach, which is set out, I agree, in fairly high level principle form, we'd like to ask for a really focused interactive workshop to be held on this in February. And then from March onwards, to ask you to consider receiving a report to every committee dedicated to the work on social mobility, so that it, alongside the service director report, you're getting something substantive each time, and you can challenge, support, but also hold us to account as officers on what, for me, is it feels like a real game changer in terms of our approach going forwards. So I think that's all I want to say about that. Shall I continue with the report, Chair, and then take questions at the end in the normal way?
Yes, I think that'd be good, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll be brief with the rest of the report. So just to come to 2.3 of the report, under 2.3.1, just to say that the Cambridgeshire local events, these are our inaugural place-based events, are developing at pace. They will be run over the next few weeks and will be pivotal in starting to align the Cambridgeshire local approach and the county council's strategic leadership alongside our partners and communities in all of our places. So a universal approach across all parts of Cambridgeshire, so that Cambridgeshire local becomes the real focus. And also in that section, we've included the details of the new recruits to Matt Oliver's team. Matt's on the call today. So Matt, within the next couple of weeks, will have a full complement of staff, both place coordinators and also support staff around comms and business intelligence. It's really important that you, as this committee, and also all of our members, get to know your place coordinators really well. They will be, as well as me and the team here on the call, your go-to people, and will really help to unblock blockages, take opportunities, and really help you problem solve. So we'll make sure that that you get to know those people really, really well. In section 2.3.2 on community safety, I'll just draw your attention to a couple of points before I'm going to ask Rob, through you, Chair, to update us on hate crime. So first of all, a note there around what appears to be a reduction in domestic abuse referrals. Now, the reductions are small, and whilst that's positive, it is something we need to keep an eye on because of the fear of underreporting. And as we've moved into another lockdown, nationally, we know that there is typically an increase in domestic abuse referrals as a consequence of people living within their own homes alongside each other. So it is something that I just wanted to flag. The reduction is welcome, but we could expect that to increase, and it's definitely something we need to keep an eye on anyway to make sure that people know how to report. And also in that section of the report at 2.3.2, a really exciting bid that's now been submitted to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government to support our chronically excluded adults programme, which is about supporting people with really complex needs that are furthest from support and have multiple needs from across a range of public services. And we're really optimistic that that bid will be successful, and Rob will bring a report, or will include a section in my next service director report on whether or not that bid's successful and what it means for this committee and our work next time round. Yes, through you, Chair, if I can ask Rob now to update us on the outstanding action from last time on hate crime.
Yes, please. Thank you. Welcome, Rob.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. So in terms of hate crime statistics, I'm going to share a screen shortly with you, which we'll be able to go into a little bit more depth. But I need to point out that hate crime statistics are recorded for the whole county via the constabulary. So the headline data covers Peterborough in this as well. And the way the constabulary separate this is for the north half of the county, which is Peterborough and Fenland, and also the south end, which is Huntingdonshire, East Cambs, South Cambs and City. So let's hope it all works. I'm going to share with you the screen. Okay, can you just confirm that's come through okay?
Not yet, Rob. Yes, here we go.
Right, there's a bit of a delay, I think. So as I'm scrolling, if people want to just point out if I go too fast. Okay, so first of all, just say the key points to note from this is hate crime reporting is generally consistent with pre-pandemic levels, particularly when we compare to the previous year. However, if you look at hopefully you can see my cursor here. If you look at the chart of the last 12 months, you can see there was a dip in reporting of all hate crime types around the first lockdown. We anticipated this at the time, and we put a lot of activity in to try to promote hate crime reporting, and we seem to be back to normal levels now, which is good. If anything, there's a slight decrease on previous year. So in terms of where we're at now, we think the lag from the pandemic, from the first lockdown, is now moved away. And although we're in that second period now, people are more confident in coming forward, it appears. Chart 2, this now starts to get into the breakdown, as I said. So we have north and south statistics. And bearing in mind, the north in the blue does also include Peterborough. So overall, I'm going to look at December now to give that snapshot of that month. There were 88 hate crimes reported across the entire force area for December. That's a slight decrease on November and is a decrease slightly on last year as well. Of these, 43 occurred in the north and 45 in the south. Now, this just gives the types of hate crime that have been reported. There's other types, of course, but over that period of the month, we've only had reports for disability, faith, race, which is by far and large, the largest area, and sexual orientation. Hopefully, the screen is now scrolled. So this gives the more defined breakdown of the types. It's quite useful because it compares December to November, also shows the percentage changes and gives you the full breakdown.
Very small, Rob. I don't know whether you can expand it to full screen, can you? Or
unfortunately, I can't. What I'll do, members, if it's okay, I'll circulate this after, but I can talk this through anyway.
That'd be great.
Northern hate crime, Peterborough and Fenland, has increased slightly overall, with hate crime types other than disability and transgender increasing. In the south, hate crime has decreased overall, with the exception of faith, and there's been low numbers of faith reporting crimes. But if you look where my cursor is now, there were 5 instances in the south reported for the month of December. No massive patterns are jumping out, with the exception of one particular series which has been identified south of the county in relation to swastikas. 8 reports of swastikas in the city of Ely throughout December, and I'll expand on that slightly in a minute. During that month of December, there were 9 victims who were repeat victims, with 7 of those in the north and 2 in the south. In the north, the vast majority, as you'd expect, were located in Peterborough. In fact, 72% of all northern crime happened in Peterborough. The remainder, though, were all in one ward in Wisbech, the Medworth ward. In the south, Cambs City accounted for 53% of all the crime, all the victims. Analysis showed that the vast majority of crimes reported in the south continued to be reported in the Market Ward in Cambridge. However, Ely East was of the blip, and that relates to the swastikas that I've mentioned. So of the 8 reports of swastikas in Ely, this happened all in the month, and it was in the form of graffiti sprayed on electricity boxes and buildings across the city. Separate to this, there was a report of a letter posted to a victim in St Neots of a swastika, but we believe that that is unconnected. The local police team in Ely are leading the investigation into the Ely trend. No suspect has been identified at this time. The following slides, and again, apologies they're small, are useful because they give a more detailed breakdown of the victim and offender characteristics. What you'll find is there's a very even picture across the county here. Victims are likely to be spread across all age groups. There's more adult victims than children, but that's not unusual. We know that much younger people crime is likely to go in unreported if it occurs in the schools, and it will be managed at a local level. In terms of the gender, there are more male than female victims. In terms of ethnicity across the county, white British is the highest victim area, but that's not surprising given its largest ethnic group. In terms of age, suspect age really mirrors, in terms of, forgive me, I'm looking at the wrong slide here. Yeah, it's not sharing, sadly, the one that I wanted to show. In terms of gender, that's the area that I wanted to talk about. Far more male victims than female victims, generally. I'll share these afterwards. Okay, moving on to suspects. In terms of suspect age, that tends to mirror what we're seeing with victims. So it's across all age groups with no real patterns. And again, in terms of suspect gender, it's generally the same, but there is an anomaly here where there are more female suspects in the north than male. And again, in terms of ethnicity, in suspects, the highest proportion of suspects are North European whites. Okay, so in terms of the partnership focus, we've continued to work across the whole system to publicise the help avenues and try and get people to come forward to report crime. We're supporting the traditional routes through the police avenues, obviously, but also through the third-party reporting centres, which are being used and are popular. And that was, as you know, put in place through this committee's leadership. The prevalence of repeat crimes and repeat offenders has been discussed by the partnership delivery group, and we've committed to addressing this. The county have just secured funding of £40,000 to pilot a scheme within the county, which is aimed to provide intervention programmes to known hate crime offenders. So this is about changing their behaviour, which we think will generate some results. It's still at the planning stage. We've only just secured that funding, but I'll be able to provide a committee with a fuller update at a later time. But we think we have a real key role to play around this and helping the police to provide some targeted intervention programs to those repeat offenders. I'm going to stop there. I hope you find the information useful. I'm sorry that the slides weren't fully viewable, but through Nick, I'll make sure they're circulated afterwards. Any questions?
Thank you, Rob. Adrian, would you like to finish your report first, and then we'll open up for the whole gambit of questions, please? Because a lot of areas being covered here. So
yeah, thank you, Chair. That would be great. And I'll be brief. I'll just jump straight now to section 2.4 of the report, which is the county-wide COVID response hub activity. So obviously, since we last spoke, we are now in national lockdown, and formal shielding has once again been stood up. So in the November month-long lockdown, shielding wasn't reinstated. So that this time round it is, and all 32,500 of our clinically extremely vulnerable residents across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are being asked to shield. until the 21st of February in the first instance. So we have once again invoked all of the measures and arrangements that we deployed at the start of the pandemic. But this time round, and I think as a result of some fantastic collaboration with district and city council colleagues and voluntary community and faith sector partners, we've got a much richer set of offers in place, which really do, I think, play to the Cambridgeshire local agenda. This is about getting support at the most local level to people that need it, with the county council providing that oversight and support. All of the contact details for you to tweet and put onto your social media or into your newsletters for how people can get support if they're in that category, or indeed are vulnerable for any other reason during the lockdown, are set out at 2.4.4 of the report. And certainly in the county-wide hub at the moment, we're receiving around about 200 individual requests for practical help a day. And that there will be a significant number going direct to each of the district and city council colleagues as well. So it is similar levels of demand, I think, to last time round. I just wanted to point out that we're also supporting our clinical commissioning group colleagues with the vaccination programme. Significant escalation of vaccination rollout from this week. Some really important work going on there, and our role at the moment has been to support people to get to vaccination centres if they haven't got their own transport or can't afford to pay for a taxi or don't have family and friends available. But also our role will start to increase, and I'd like to bring a paper forward to committee on this in due course. Our role will include working with lots of vulnerable groups, isolated groups, people that perhaps are very nervous about getting a vaccination or are taking note of some of the propaganda that is out there that says the vaccinations aren't safe. We'll be very much asked by the CCG to work with our communities to dispel those myths and to help people get to a vaccination site. There was a request last time we met to provide more details on the Winter Support Grant Scheme, and so there is an analysis at 2.4.8 and 0.9. So happy to take any questions on any of that. And finally, at 2.5, there's a further breakdown along with an appendix of the principles behind the savings target that this committee has of £200,000 in the 2021-22 financial year. I just draw your attention actually to a sentence at 2.5.4, which is really important, and says that anything that will result in a reduced level of service delivery is out of scope. I know that was a concern last time round, rightly so. So it is there now in black and white. There will not be any service impacts as a consequence of identifying that level of saving. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Adrian. And just members, a comment from me on the increased focus on social mobility that Adrian so ably shone a light on earlier in his presentation. Of course, we will need to continue business as usual with all our services, but very much with the outcome of supporting our residents as we recover from the pandemic and the challenges they face, a focus of that work. So not to take our eye off the running libraries and all the other things that we normally do, but that will be a key outcome that all those services will be looking to help us achieve. So open to questions and comments, members. I've got Councillor Every and then Councillor Simone Taylor. Liz.
Hi, thank you very much, Chair, and just wanted to just a couple of things. First of all, I'm absolutely behind this report. It is a fantastic report. It's very diverse, and there's a lot going on in there, which we're all going to have to support. And I just wanted to ask a question, but also make a statement, really. First of all, I just wanted to include Rob in his report and just comment on the swastikas in Ely, because of course that's my area, and I just wanted to commend the Community Safety Partnership for the way they responded to this. They went up and they came down with almost in almost 24 hours. So it was a huge community response to this, some nervousness about where this was coming from, but I think we've got a handle on it, and the police have been absolutely fantastic. So I just wanted to say, Rob, thank you very much. It took us all a bit by surprise in Ely, I have to say, but nevertheless, we're on it. I wanted to say to Adrian that I believe the timing is absolutely right for this. I don't think we could be in a better place, a better position, ever than we are in now to support and to move on towards social mobility, which is obviously the key. And one of the questions I wanted to just pose was, we have huge partnership working now. It's so large. I mean, you say 44 people around no, I was going to say a table, I mean a Zoom. And one of the issues with having such a large a partnership approach brings its own challenges, doesn't it, in terms of not overlap, but making sure all the partners work together and that there's communication which is sound, and all our officers, but also our volunteers feel part of that bigger process. And I know this is very embryonic, and we've just started this, but I just wanted to ask you how you were proposing to roll this out. So you're going to get buy-in from all those people, not just from the county, but all those people, all those volunteers we've got now on the ground, bottom up, to get something that's cohesive and not look as if it's more fragmented than it might have been before, if that makes sense. I know it's early days, Adrian. So
thank you again through you, Chair, if I may. First of all, thank you very much for confirming your support. I do think the timing is absolutely right. Probably will never happen this way again, so we've got to take it, I think. And you're right, absolutely right. I mean, you can't also make decisions with a group of 44 people easily, because you can't hear 44 people's voices fairly, and you can't obviously have a debate. So we found a natural rhythm, and in fact, strengthening this from now, and in the spirit of using Christmas as a reset. And we have those 44 people now meeting once a fortnight. There is debate and a lot of interaction, both verbally and also using the Zoom features in chat and other ways, which is a brilliant way of capturing anybody's thoughts. We don't use it to make decisions. We do use it to brief. And this week, as an example, we had a very focused discussion on economic hardship and some work that one of our colleagues, a director in Huntingdonshire District Council, Oliver Morley, has been leading for us on behalf of the system as part of the recovery work. And that enabled Oliver to table a paper, present some slides, and get some really creative insights from across the partnership, including a lot of voluntary sector organisations that are arguably much more in touch with some of the people that are more adversely affected. So I don't want to lose that large group and that ability, but we have had to put in place an arrangement with a smaller group that sits beneath that to take that input, take it very seriously, process it, and then determine what we're going to do with it. And then we take that back up again to the community resilience group next time we meet. So it's a nice rhythm between the large debate that feeds through to a small group, and then we take that back up again, and so it continues. But the real magic is going to happen at a hyper local level. I think you're absolutely right, and it would be disrespectful of us to disregard now the huge effort that's been put into the last year nearly from communities themselves and our citizens, often, as we all know, in an informal way and without being asked, let alone all of the fantastic community-led, voluntary sector-led, faith sector-led initiatives that have also existed, and often under the leadership of our parish and town councils. So for me, what we agree here as a county council in terms of the spirit and principles of social mobility has to then be translated to our 22 individual localities, and then interpreted to suit the local circumstances. So what we do in a dozen of those 22 areas might look very different to what we do in the remainder, or it might be that what we do is different in 22 different localities, because it's got to fit the local need. So that will be based on evidence, it will be based on data, it will be based on the real issues that citizens are facing, and also the strength of the partnerships that exist in those localities. So it's like an inverse triangle for me, really, that we've got here a strategic role to play in setting direction, committing the local authority to an important piece of work, to giving me the mandate to work with our partners to develop that work, but then critically to ensure that that work is then interpreted at a hyperlocal level to be meaningful.
Thank you, Adrian. It's almost a good problem to have that we have so many people who want to work on this. So thank you very much, and good luck with it. Great to be part of it.
Thank you, Liz. I've got several other speakers, but I noticed, Matt, you've put your hand up, and of course you're leading on the Cambridgeshire local initiative. So did you want to add to what Adrian's just said, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Sort of desperately, not that Adrian wasn't doing a fantastic job, but absolutely the Cambridgeshire local events are the first rung of the ladder and the foundation for that way of understanding how everything will fit together in those places. So we must come out of those engagement events with an understanding, and not a top-down understanding, but a true partnership understanding of how we're going to make sure that everybody is fitting together in the way that you described, Councillor Every. So it is about the CRG group, has its function, the kind of the group that sits underneath that, the smaller group, but then how we set a framework in place in all of those 22 areas at every level, district, town, parish council and community group level, as well as our, all the other services, to have a single version of the truth in those places, so we can understand and not duplicate and not overstep. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Councillor Simone Taylor. Simone.
Hello, thank you, Chair. I've just got a few concerns. It's actually nothing on the report, but the vaccination clinics, they're obviously needing volunteers for marshalling and stewarding. Now, certainly in Huntingdonshire, that has been coordinated. Some of it has been coordinated through Hunt's Forum. I've just had an email, yesterday, from the forum saying that it's now been taken over by CCG. So centrally, they're taking over it, and it's going to commence through the Good Samaritan, the Good Sam app, which people have to go on there and register. They have to put some proof of ID in. Now, my concern there is it's kind of taken away from our local, our local communities in the respect of being able to get there. I mean, Hunt's Forum know all our community volunteers. They know, the ones in St Neots, they know the ones in Ramsey. So it just feels as though my concern is, and also when you register, it could take up to 2 weeks for them to approve. So I'm worried that these volunteers are not going to come through because it's been taken away from us locally. It's just my concern on it that, it seemed to be working. Why has it gone this way?
Can you shine a light on that, Adrian, for us? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Taylor. So a couple of things to say, really. First of all a very live issue. So Councillor Taylor is quite right to highlight it. We, in the form of Matt and I, have met this week with Julie Farrow, the Chief Executive at Hunt's Forum, to talk this through. And in turn, she's met with the other 2 councils for voluntary service that exist across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. The reality is that the vaccination programme is very much driven nationally down to the local clinical commissioning group. And there's been very little wriggle room, really, that the CCG, the clinical commissioning group, has been able to deploy across the whole of the vaccination programme. It is starting to ease up a bit. And funnily enough, this morning in my inbox is an email from the Director of Governance at the CCG asking for a quick chat about how we might resolve what appears to be some confusion, actually, around who is responsible for what. The direction nationally is that volunteers for the vaccination programme needs to go through the CCG workplace and volunteer cell. But you're absolutely right, of course, that local is best, and that's been our mantra all along, ever since this committee was formed, and before that. And so that local knowledge is something we must make sure is incorporated. So it will also be raised today at the Health Protection Board, which is the formal governance board for our COVID response. So I'm optimistic that we'll be able to resolve this with working collaboratively, as we have done all along with the vaccination programme with the CCG, and making sure that they can show that at the national level that they're being compliant, but that we're able to introduce all our local knowledge. Julie and colleagues did go as far as developing a protocol for recruitment, role descriptions and so on. So we don't want all of that great work to go to waste, and we'll make sure that that's true. It's also worth just saying, Chair, if I may, very briefly, that there is a huge demand for volunteers across other functions to do with COVID, and particularly the mass testing programs and outbreak management, supporting for care homes and so on. And the risk is if we split out volunteer recruitment across two different organisations, and effectively all looking for volunteers, it's going to get very confusing and actually adds pressure to volunteers that are willing to come forwards unnecessarily. So we do want that coordination. I can update next time we meet, but I'm probably more inclined, Chair, if it's permissible, to send a note round to committee members after the next few days when we've managed to sort this out, this confusion out, and report back via that route for your reassurance.
Yes, that'd be welcome, Adrian. Thank you very much.
Right.
Thank you.
Happy with that, Simone?
Yeah, can I just say, I mean, I've now registered on the Good Sam app, but my concern now is, could it take up to 2 weeks for them to come back and say, because I can't actually even get on the app until they've accepted my registration. So, you know, this is a problem as well.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, thank you. So Adrian will pick that up. Thank you very much, Adrian. Councillor Machini, Elisa.
Thank you, Chair. I do apologise. I've had a terrible problems with internet today, so I'm not visible. But thank you very much for the report. I think it's amazing as usual. And thank you so much for including the data about the winter grants. That's 90% of what I wanted to see. And it's very informative, and thank you so much. I've got two little follow-ups to that. Number one, am I to assume that all the requests for help listed have been followed up and acted upon and spent money on? That's the implication. I just wanted to confirm. And second of all, it would be useful to see if, I mean, I think from my perspective, it would be useful to see if, I'm assuming we have a plan for the staggering of how much we're paying when, that's not making a great deal of sense in my head. But basically, I was trying to see a kind of projection as to whether, you know, we are sort of expecting the winter grant to be enough to cover the level of requests that we are having from now until, because I suppose we can predict with some accuracy the number of free school meals that we will issue. As a result of that, we know with some accuracy how much money we have left, and we should be able to compare that with the projected number of requests for other kind of help that we're going to get. I think that would be, I don't know if you thought that was going into too much detail, but it's the kind of thing I really, really wanted to see, because it shows the sort of, you know, situation that we're in, and the breakdown by district is fabulous, very useful. Thank you so much again for that, for looking into that.
Thank you, Lisa. And I know Adrian are managing that situation, so perhaps I'll just give a bit more detail. Adrian, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Machini, again for your support and for the question. So yeah, I can absolutely confirm that every one of the applications that have been received have had a direct telephone conversation where we've been able to make contact, and there's a vast majority of those people have responded. There are a small number where contact hasn't been possible, and despite a number of attempts, but the door remains open. But everyone, the vast majority of people that have applied for support have had a phone call. Those phone calls typically lasting 20 minutes or more, and delivered by our hub coordination staff team, and they have found they've been able to delve into a lot more information than was provided on the initial application form, and that's by design. We didn't want the initial application form to be a big barrier to people asking for help, so all that captures is the most basic information. Then the telephone call is where we get into the granularity, and that's we've been able to explore all sorts of issues. A huge proportion of those people have already received emergency help in the forms that are set out in the report, but we're also able and are working through right now to pass with the applicant's agreement, the details of the issues they're facing through to our network of winter support grant partners that we established at the start of the scheme back in December. And just as a reminder, in Cambridgeshire, that includes the Citizens Advice Bureaus, some energy efficiency organisations, a range of charities, and critically our district and city council partners. The beauty of that is that we can both provide an immediate, urgent form of support. That might be an energy fuel voucher or a food parcel. But unlike, I think, many other areas, we are able also to make sure that that person is getting longer term help and support. That might be as simple as switching their energy supplier if they didn't know they could do that, or right through to really in-depth debt advice to get back onto a more even keel. And of course, we can link in, very much playing to the social mobility theme, actually, some of our other services, particularly the skills service, where we're able to identify opportunities for people who are just in complete meltdown as far as their circumstances are concerned. Once we deal with their immediate needs, we can get them into an adult skills course that helps them get back into employment. So I think we've got a really great package, actually, and the DWP, the Department for Work and Pensions, who manage the scheme, are really supportive of the model we've developed. It isn't like that everywhere across the country, but that's the model we've developed. In terms of the budget, yes, you're absolutely right. We can forecast spend, and of course, a big part of the scheme is the issuing of food vouchers during the Christmas holiday period. That will be repeated for the February half-term period. Now, that's an absolute guarantee that everybody eligible for free school meals, plus a couple of other cohorts of young people, will receive a food voucher for February half-term. And we've assumed that everybody that receives that voucher will use it to produce our financial forecasts. And we're still left with a small working balance that we're now deploying to think about what else we can do based on our learning so far to support a larger number of families longer term. So we think we need to invest a little bit more of that budget, for example, into energy efficiency schemes, home warmth schemes that help people avoid having to make a choice between putting food on the table or heating their house. We're also investing a small sum of money in something called Family Fund, which allows a trusted number of voluntary and community sector organisations to make direct cash awards. That's just in the process of being finalised, and that's been developed as a consequence of the demands we've been seeing. So I'm optimistic that we will, in fact, I'm confident that we will have enough budget to meet our aspirations and, in fact, exceed them in some cases. We're keen now to hear what we can do with our partners for the longer term as a consequence of all this amazing work. So I hope that's reassuring, and obviously happy to provide any further details in future reports or in a briefing note. Yeah, no, that's very reassuring. Thank you so much, Adrian, as usual. It's excellent work, and I was interested in the projection because it's difficult to measure the the need against the money that you get. I mean, every money you get is great. If given the choice, you always want more money rather than less. But it would have been nice to see to see the reality in front of me of how they measure up against each other, and obviously what we're doing to make the best and the most of the necessarily limited money that we're getting. Sure. But thank you very much for all of that, and please keep these updates coming, the more detail rather than the less, for me anyway, because I find it really useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. I've got Councillor Costello. Adela.
Yeah, hi, thanks. Questions for Rob, they're all sort of interlinked. First of all, I just wondered if perpetrators of hate crime were prosecuted. If so, what are the penalties? And is it advertised to the general public? I mean, if people are made aware that, they could be facing £10,000 fines for hate crime, it might make them think twice before doing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Costello. Yeah, I'm pleased to confirm that around 10 years ago, an extra legislation was brought in to enhance crime if there was a hate element attached to that. So if they commit an offence, they'll be charged with, for example, harassment, but it'll be added a aggravating factor, which attracts a larger sentence. So the courts have that ability to go and do that, and they are very vociferous in making sure that happens. So it will receive a longer sentence. In terms of publication, very much so. If there's a clear case of conviction around this, then we work with the partnership to make sure that we publicise that to good effect through the local press.
Thank you.
Thanks, Adela. Councillor French, Jan.
Thank you, Steve. Yeah, once again, great report, Adrian, and well done to the hard work all your staff have put into it. Going back to the vaccination stations, we in Finland, I understand that Wisbech started vaccinating a couple of weeks ago, and that's going well with the Wisbech Minor Injury Unit and some of the surgeries in North Brink. Yesterday, I believe that March and surrounding areas started. I'm actually going there at 4 o'clock to do car parking marshalling for 4 hours. I hope it's not cold. Anyway, we've got somebody called Catherine Carman. She is the social prescriber who is actually organising all this, and that covers Doddington, Wimbledon, Maney, Sutton, Benwick, Doddington, and obviously all the March, and it's all the surgeries have actually gone together. So it's great, actually. It is being rolled out. I've had quite a few emails wondering why they haven't been called in, especially the over 80s, but I believe that that's been done now. So again, I think, you know, I know that Simone did have concerns. Certainly what I've seen, the way it's been organised, and Catherine has kept me up well informed. I've got a document that I need to print off, sign it. So I don't know where you get the idea that it's going to take 2 weeks. When I first contacted Catherine, she phoned me within half an hour, and I gave her a load of volunteers, and she's followed them up. So I'm quite sure, you know, we've got well organised here, and well done, the lot of you.
Thank you, Jan. That's great to hear. So perhaps, Adrian, it's not county-wide the way it's being organised. There's a more localised approach, which can be a bit hit and miss at times.
Yes, that's right. And just to clarify the point that Councillor Taylor was making about 2 weeks as well, there's a difference between the local deployment of volunteers and the recruitment through NHS volunteer responders, which is taking 2 weeks to be validated. So absolutely, Councillor French, you're absolutely right. There is some really effective work going on the ground locally. The important point here is, again, this is being led by our health colleagues, and it has been a huge programme to roll out. And I think health colleagues are doing a remarkable job at circumstances. And really critically, this is an important week this week, because all 21 of our primary care networks from this week will begin their vaccination programmes. So Councillor French, you were mentioning some additional sites. We'll see that now across our county, and we'll be able to release to our comms colleagues more information on that over the coming days. That means that there's a really good cover, or certainly will be in the next few hours and days across our county. The intention is that everybody is within a 10-mile radius of a vaccination site. So there's a little bit of work still to be done on that, particularly in a couple of locations, but I think health colleagues have done really well to get GP surgeries through those primary care networks signed up and operating. Yeah, and we go back to the point we made earlier, really, about needing to resolve this difference between local and national direction on volunteering, which we'll pick up, as I've said earlier, today and tomorrow.
Thank you, Adrian. Simone, you wanted to briefly come back again?
Yeah, can I just clarify that? As Adrian said, absolutely, Councillor French, our community groups and volunteers have been doing this locally, and it has been working. As far as I know, I've been doing the marshalling as well. But my concern now is it's being taken away from us locally, and it's going through centrally through the CCG. And for me now to volunteer, I've had to register with them, and it could take, I'm sure it won't, but it could take up to 2 weeks for them to accept my registration before I can get on the app. And I am hoping it won't take that long, but that is my concern. And my concern is that locally, we won't know about this.
Thanks, Simone. So it sounds as if Adrian's on the case, and his discussions with CCG hopefully will improve things. But if you're happy for him to take that away and follow up on that, that would be great. Thank you very much. So any other points, questions, members? Very comprehensive report from Adrian and colleagues. Thank you very much. So we're being asked to note and comment on the key themes discussed in the report, endorse the proposals to create a clear and ambitious focus on social mobility to support the levelling up of communities across Cambridgeshire. I haven't heard any negative comments, so hopefully we're all in agreement. So please show if anybody has any objections. Okay, I see nobody indicating, so thank you very much, everybody. We'll take those recommendations as carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. So now we move on to item 5, which is the Innovate and Cultivate Fund Annual Evaluation Report, and our Think Communities Manager, Elaine Matthews. Welcome, Elaine.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everybody. Yes, I'm here to present the paper, which gives you the summary of the annual evaluation of our fund, which relates to the period 2019 to 20. This committee is so very familiar already with the fund and indeed actively involved. So I'm not going to go into great detail any of the background shown in this paper, other than to note that the main points from that are that last year, as a result of our last year's evaluation, we agreed 4 priorities for the coming year. And these are shown at 1.5 of the paper. And as I go through the paper, you'll see how we've met those and more throughout the year. So to start off, really, I just want to point out this evaluation has been completed by Cambridge Community Foundation, who administer the fund for us, but also our Innovate and Cultivate steering group. And that includes the chair of this committee on that group. It focuses on the applications that we've received for the 3 funding rounds in 2019 to 20 and reviews of all completed projects within that period. Where we can, we've compared the data that of previous years. And for this year, over those 3 rounds, we had 45 applications submitted to the Innovate and Cultivate Fund during those 3 rounds. This compares to a much higher rate of 88 applications for 4 rounds in the year before. However, what is really worth noting there is in 2019-20, 44% of those applications were awarded funding, and that compares with a lower 30% in the previous year. And we already know from the evaluation that we've done and the discussions that we've had is that the highest success rate in this later year can be attributed to the much improved targeted communication, which was mentioned at 1.4 as one of our improvement activities, and also the stronger emphasis on pre-application support that strengthens really good applications and diverts projects that do not or are unlikely to meet the fund criteria to other sources of support and funding. So these pre-application advice sessions have continued to be really well attended this year. We've had 106 delegates attending, many of whom have sought pre-application advice as well from CCF and CC officers on an informal basis. The applications support those potential applicants to develop their funding proposals that meet our fund criteria. And where that's not possible or it's not what they want to do, then they can choose not to apply. And we also help them with advising about other fund opportunities and give them professional support to develop their projects or link them into appropriate partnerships, including Support Cambridgeshire, who really help a lot with some of those emerging groups to help them develop their organisation structure, their policies, their funding application skills, and give training and advice. At 2.3 of this report, we illustrate the impact of that additional support. And it's really interesting to see these figures. So in December 2020, the Children and Young People Service Leads, so as one of several service leads involved in these consultation events, she held 20 consultation meetings. 5 of those are likely to apply to the fund. 4 groups were able to access additional funding, which allowed them to support residents affected by the pandemic, and 3 groups engaged with officers to seek funding opportunities better matched to their projects. 5 groups have been supported to engage with partners that hadn't previously been linked to. And it's anticipated as a result of those conversations and that pre-application support, that will generate in excess of £25,000 of funding from alternative streams. When we've been evaluating which service priority successful applications focused on, there's very little change to previous years, with just over half focusing on adult social care. At 2.5 in Appendix 1, you'll see information there that shows the geographical areas of delivery for projects funded in 2019 and 20. And when we combine the Innovate and the Cultivate funded projects, there's a higher number of funded projects delivering projects in Huntingdonshire, but then an even spread across the other areas. The amount of funding committed during 2019 and 20 is up to £544,028. If we include all the awards that have been made since the start of this fund, the total amount of funding committed comes to £1,695,747.50. And the amount of uncommitted funds remaining now for future rounds is at the moment £139,254. As a result of those applications that were unsuccessful, as part of the evaluation, we always look at why those applications are not successful and what we can do to support them. So in line with previous years, the number of applications that were most commonly unsuccessful in securing funding was because they didn't meet the key funding criteria relating to demand reduction and return on investment. It's interesting to note that many of those unsuccessful didn't attend the pre-application advice sessions, or perhaps wanted to proceed anyway to see if they could be successful. At 2.8, we set out the estimated return on investment for the 14 projects that completed their funding term during this period. So the total amount of grants that were committed in 2019-20 came to £304,245.88. And it's at this point that I respectfully draw committee's attention to an error in the published report at 2.8 and at Appendix 2. The figures should read that the total estimated return on investment, including the grant award, is actually a much higher rate of £647,832. So not the 427,000 mentioned in the report. This error was due to the recently noticed technical error in our recording sheet and has now been corrected. It only related to this project. It wasn't an error that affected other grants. So in most cases, we're seeing a really great return on investment. And many of the projects are geared towards helping early help and prevention. For example, building that community capacity through increased volunteering and community social actions, including those that result in residents living independently for longer within their own homes and within their communities. It's really important to note that these projects help the council avoid future cost escalations and delay anticipated increases in demand, rather than leading to savings which can directly reduce the recurrent amount of cash spent on existing services. At Appendix C3, you'll see details of the 29 currently live funded projects. And you'll see from that the total grants committed come to just under 700,000, and the projected expected return on investment from those 29 projects, including the grant award, is over £1.2 million. Each of the 14 projects completing their funding term during this period have submitted a very detailed final monitoring report, and the evaluations of that show that they're providing really high quality care and support to some of our most vulnerable residents, and also supporting, whilst also providing capacity and support to community groups and voluntary organisations. As well as meeting the high-level priority service level outcomes, the 14 completed projects are also achieving really positive outcomes for beneficiaries and our wider communities, and that's shown in more detail at 2.12 of the paper. But this includes matters that are really close to our hearts and that's often mentioned at this committee, things like reducing loneliness and isolation, increasing confidence and independence. We're looking at reduced incidence of domestic abuse. We're looking at improved behaviour and well-being of children and increased access to positive activities for young people. It also includes reduced stress and mental distress and increased awareness of local support networks, increased friendship circles, social engagement and more social opportunities, but also focusing on respite for carers and support for those with dementia, as well as increased digital inclusion and connectivity. The impacts on the wider community include, really importantly, increased volunteering and improved skills and confidence for our volunteers, local support networks, who also provide that food, goods, services and assistance during the pandemic and continue to do so now, really increasing that sense of community and togetherness. In addition to the positive impacts, these projects are often invaluable opportunities for learning for the County Council, so where innovation allows a different way of working and positively challenges our own thinking. As part of the annual evaluation, applicants were also asked to comment on their experience of the fund, and that's shown at 2.13, and it again is very largely positive and an improvement on previous years. At 2.14, you can see there that in November 2020, CCF sent a questionnaire to 36 of the groups who have live grants from the Innovate and Cultivate Fund, asking about the impact of the pandemic on their fund, and they received 22 responses. The most common impacts of the pandemic to date include moving programmes and operations online where possible, or shutting down and postponing programmes that could not be moved online. So projects reported an increased demand for services and for some a reduction in income. The most commonly anticipated needs and impacts include increased financial uncertainty as reserves dwindle, maintaining offline offerings and continued increases in the need of services, but also being increasingly reliant on grant funding. We had some really nice case study comments back from some of those funded projects, and they're also shown in the paper, so I won't go over those in great detail, but it's really heartwarming to see how this fund really is making a huge difference for those groups. The County Council project service leads, who spend a lot of time pre-application, but also once funding has been agreed, supporting those groups, was separately asked to reflect on the impacts of the pandemic on the projects that they supported. As well as comments on the impact of face-to-face work, they reported that many groups have been able to respond rapidly and effectively to the challenges of the pandemic, including, of course, those well-established and very familiar groups to us, time banks, and the parish nursing, social prescribing and good neighbour schemes in particular. Many organisations have seen a demand rise on their services, and in particular employment support programmes for people with mental health problems or physical or learning disabilities have been impacted by the reduction in suitable employment and work experience opportunities for their clients. It's been hampered by the move to online coaching and mentoring, which for some clients they either struggle or cannot engage with. Service leads have continued to support all of their projects throughout the pandemic to continue to deliver their programme, to adapt their projects to the new realities, and either to pause projects or start them in more suitable circumstances, whilst agreeing pathways to achieving targets and outcomes. At 2.16 there, to summarise the key changes that we've made to the fund in 2019 to 20, As agreed by committee in March last year and mentioned in 1.4 of this report, 4 key areas of focus were agreed for this coming year and all have been addressed. So influencing future commissioning decisions, the learning from 3 projects, including delivering learning disability employment support, have shaped the new commissioning models in that service area. The introduction of a micro grant scheme will be taken up using alternative funding made available to the Think Community Service. We've had 3 new Cultivate project ideas in place this year, and they provide guidance to apply to grants for community youth workers, mobile warden schemes, and digital inclusion projects. We've improved our targeted communication and in particular updated children and family service priorities to reflect current service priorities and are being more in line with Think Communities and Cambridgeshire local priorities and ethos. We've also more recently reduced the Cultivate grant threshold from 19,000 to 15,000, in particular for the 1st of February 2021 funding round. And that will reflect the high demand for funding and the diminishing funds remaining at the moment for this round. We have revised the method of data collection on the Innovate progress monitoring forms to make sure that their more consistent data is available to evaluate those completed projects. We've adapted the pre-application advice sessions from in-person to being telephone appointments or through Zoom. This has been highly successful and more flexible and accommodating for those people wishing to apply, and in fact have resulted in higher attendance and higher application success rates as a result. At 2.17, the paper sets out the ICF steering group recommendations for 2021. And we have there a number of items which we would like to recommend for improvement, and that includes a request to General Purposes Committee for a further 300,000 in additional funds to continue ICF as a cultivate-only fund. This focus is appropriate for delivery of Cambridgeshire Local. It will enable our local communities to develop person-centred, place-based solutions. The steering group also recommend that we discontinue the Innovate funding stream now with immediate effect. That we also train Think Communities community connectors as part of their induction to act as ambassadors to fund, but also very importantly to bring back the learning from their local connections to develop ideas for more impactful community activity. We're looking to refine the monitoring requirements for all the grants to make them more efficient, and also develop a new project monitoring system that makes better use of the resources engaged with the fund. We also wish to revise the system for CCC payment of grant installations to the Cambridgeshire Community Foundation, which will be more administratively efficient. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Very comprehensive report. Thank you. And obviously just outlining the way we'd like to go forward. So open to members for any comments or questions. Simone.
Yeah, hi. It'll be a quick one because I'm going to have to go in a minute. So I'm not sort of au fait with, because I've not been on the meeting for so long now, excuse me, on the committee for so long. So with that proposal from the steering board, this is a permanent thing then, so you won't ever have the, which one is it, the Innovate.
We're seeking the Innovate, yes.
So that is, yeah, so that's going, so it's just the Cultivate that's staying, yes. And that's an ongoing thing that's going to happen. So does that mean that you'll have more projects under that banner then?
Absolutely, yes. So the Innovate is the higher value fund, which is up to 50,000. And so if we've got a smaller fund available, we've been looking really carefully at the impact of both the innovation funded projects, but also those that have been funded through Cultivate. So Cultivate is the smaller, usually smaller local community groups that apply for that, up to 15,000. And we just think with a smaller pot of money left available to us, we can make better use of that money by having the smaller cultivate grants. We've seen through the evaluation how successful they are and what a difference they're making to people in our communities and what a difference it's making in that really local area. So it completely fits with our Cambridgeshire local ethos of having those smaller grants that can be delivered in those local areas.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I actually totally agree with that. That totally makes sense. I'm going to have to leave, so I won't get time to vote.
Okay, thank you, Simone.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for your participation. Councillor Machini, Lisa.
Thank you, Chair. I am experimentally back on video. Let's see if this works. On the other hand, I am now being told by my computer that it will restart no matter what I do in an hour and 20 minutes. So that's the wonders of doing this online. Where do I start? So many things I want to say. Thank you so much, Elaine, for everything you've done so far. I mean, it's been the most amazing thing to be part of this fund. I love every bit of it. I've been in it since the beginning, and it's done such amazing things in our communities. And the only desire is that we would be able to always do more. I am aware that we are in very challenging times as a result. So first of all, I wanted to ask a question about, this is going to scare some people. It's about maths. So let me find it. See, now I can't scroll because the stupid window is telling me that I have to restart. 2.6. That's 2.6 in the report, where it says, the amount of funding committed during 2019-20 is 544,000 and change. And the total for, hang on a second. So the total over 3 years, unless I'm reading this wrong, is 1,600,000 and change. I was just wondering, was it always the same number of money, the same amount of money that we committed to the fund every year since it began? And I thought it was 1 million a year, but from these figures, it doesn't look like that. So I'm a little bit confused. It's probably my fault. I lost something along the way. But also in terms of the recommendations I am vaguely agnostic about the focus on innovate or cultivate, because, I do trust that we are constantly keeping under review what's the most effective way of using the resources that we have. I did wonder whether approving the first 2 points of the recommendations would preclude us from adding further money to the pot later on, and I really hope that the answer is no, because that would be my condition for supporting the first 2 points. I have no problem with the rest of the recommendations, and as I said, a stupendously fantastic project. I have no words for praising it enough, and I really do hope we continue to do as much as we can.
Thank you, Elisa. Can I just answer one of those points? So there's nothing to preclude us adding funding in at a later date if we wish. So that would just be a separate decision, and it would go through GPC presumably. So this is just a proposal that we've got at the moment to keep the fund running. So. And did you want to pick up on the £1 million, Elaine?
Absolutely, yes. So it isn't £1 million a year. We were given a pot of money at the very start of the project. We were given our first million, but there was no timescale set on how quickly we had to use that. And then we were given a top up a couple of years later of another £1 million. And again, really, hopefully, we haven't been given, it's not fixed to a financial year. We draw the money down as we use it, and that's why we're always so careful to make sure we're funding the right projects. What is probably worth noting is that when we talk about the total amount of money that has been committed, we always talk about up to, because quite often when we award some money, it's with some conditions of grant awarded. So we generally show in the paper the amount of money that's been awarded up to. So for example, if we've said we've awarded up to 15,000, it might be that some projects then don't need the full amount, and so they don't actually draw down that full amount. So sometimes when you compare this with year on year, it might show a slightly different figure that you were given last year to this year, and it's because the money was, as I say, awarded up to, and it's not always used in full. And occasionally there's projects that we've got who haven't been able to fulfil their project for lots of different reasons, and then although being awarded, then at some point withdraw. So that means that the total amount committed sometimes fluctuates a little bit.
I see. No, that makes sense. I do remember approving the 2 millions at 2 different points in time, and I clearly drew my own conclusions about that. But does that therefore mean, I'm so sorry, I'm assuming I'm allowed to ask follow-up, please stop me if I'm not. Does that therefore mean that in addition to these, at this particular point in time, £300,000 that we will be asking GEPC, that we still have unclaimed money in the pot and we're not losing that, we're keeping it?
Yeah.
It says 100,000 something or other in the report. It sounds a bit low from what I've heard just now, but clearly, again, my maths is failing me, because, you know, if we had 2 million and we've committed 1.6, shouldn't there be 400,000? But
I understand. Yes,
you know,
I understand you.
sorry about this, but basically that's, you know, do we have left over in addition to those £300,000 and they remain ours?
At the moment, at 2.6, those figures are accurate as we meet today. So the total amount committed is just under 1.7 million. You're right, that doesn't quite add up to how much is remaining. But within that fund, we also have administrative costs and other fees that have to be made from that pot. So it's not every penny, unfortunately, doesn't go towards the funding for the projects, because we have other costs of running the fund included in that. And that's why at the moment, the total remaining for our next round and for future rounds is, as we currently stand, it's £139,254 left available for funding for projects.
Thank you. So Elisa, if we allow the fund to run completely dry, we can't advertise schemes in the future. So we need to top it up before we get to the point where we've got no funding, because of course we're usually working 2 or 3 months ahead. So as Elaine said, there is a little bit of money left in the pot, but if we're going to advertise further rounds of the Cultivate Fund, we need to make sure we could deliver those if they're successful. So hence the request for £300,000 to keep the scheme going.
That makes perfect sense, and thank you, I've learned something.
Thank you, Lisa. So Councillor Batchelor, Henry.
Thank you. I think the question has been answered. I was just going to get some absolute clarity on the funding again. I just wanted to double check that if we do discontinue the Innovate funding, we're not therefore losing funding that we would have allocated to that. In fact, we're actually asking for a further 300,000 to keep the Cultivate stream running. But as I said, I think from the previous answer, I think I'm satisfied with it.
Yes, so you're right, Henry, that what you've said is correct. So that's fine. Thank you very much. Any other questions, any other points, members? Before we move on, okay, I see nobody indicating, so we just need to turn to the recommendations, please, to support and endorse the recommendation from the Innovate and Cultivate Fund Steering Group as listed in section 2.17 of the report. So any dissent, please indicate, members, otherwise we'll assume everyone's happy with that recommendation. I see nobody showing, so thank you very much, everybody. We'll take that as accepted recommendation. So we move on to item 6, which is community champions oral updates. We'll just go through the 4 community champions, if I may. Councillor Costello, have you anything to report?
Sorry, didn't get unmuted. I've sent my report in for Nick. I suppose the only thing I have to say is about the overwhelming success of winter warmers. So we've got items coming out of our region, so much so that we're now looking at dispersing them around the county as opposed to Huntingdonshire. There's going to be another collection at the week beginning of the 1st of February, and at that point we're going to ask our knitters to stand down until October, November of this year, when we'll try and start it all up again. So it's a huge success, and thanks, Elaine, for supporting as well.
Thanks, Adela. Any questions for Adela? No, that's great. Thank you very much. So we move on to Councillor Every. Liz, do you have anything to report?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say, particularly as Rob is still here, so that's really good. I think we've really moved things forward across the district. Now we're working so closely with Cambridgeshire Live team. I just feel, that I wanted to say that there's a synergy now, which I think is working really, really well. And I just wanted to also endorse for my other champions how important the CSP is. I mean, I would say that, wouldn't I? But nevertheless, what we've done is the CSP has now has themes that it's working to, and it's just moved from its safer street themes to domestic violence and child exploitation. So the delivery teams are working on that, and coming out of a PCN, drugs and alcohol working party, which came out of the Innovate Fund, I might add, which is really good. We have actually identified a group of people where domestic abuse seems to be rising, and that's about young mothers and pregnant ladies, obviously, and so we're looking at changing the approach about how we're going to do that. So we've got an action plan coming forward on that, working with the other agencies. But we've also decided to try to work differently with across the district by pulling together all the councillors, instead of just dealing with a county councillor or a district councillor or a parish councillor. That actually, as a community safety department, we want to pull these councillors together, so that as we put the messages out that is going on in terms of our action planning, that we involve all the councillors and not try to differentiate, because it's really, because they have a role on the ground. It's really, really important that they're aware of what's actually happening. We've launched the Youth Advisory Board. Thank you so much. I can't tell you, this is great. In East Cambs, we had our first meeting yesterday, and following the meeting we had last time when we had the skills presentation, we're putting together the skills team, the combined authority and East Cambs to try and set up a skills forum in East Cambs, and we're working with Fenland on that as well. But very much locally, we've got involved in initiative sourcing devices for our local schools, which we're trying to link into what Jonathan Lewis is obviously doing on a wider scale, but working with our local companies and our local schools to try and get some of their devices is together. But I think, as I said, the key is how everybody's working together. We're very lucky with our place-based coordinator now. We've got our 2 connectors as well, so we meet regularly to see what's going on. So it's really good. But individually, I'm working on the Cultivate bid for a youth worker for Littleport, obviously, and I've been asked by Surrey County Councillor to help with some fundraising for their new football pitch with the school. So it's sort of strategic, but it's also individual as well. And I just I'm really, really grateful to the officers right across the board, because I think I've been able to do things I would never have been able to do across the district without their support and networking opportunities. So I just want to say a huge thank you to Elaine and her team for making things happen on the ground. It's great.
Thank you, Liz, and thanks for making so much of your community champion role. It's really great to see that. Thank you very much. Councillor French, Jan, do you have anything you'd like to report?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yes, I've been working for many months with a group called Mad Cat. I know Elaine's heard of it, and Kerry, unfortunately, Kerry's not here. Mad Cat is, it includes what they call Chat Tea, 2020 Productions, March Food Bank, FACT, Clarion, FDC and County Council social prescribers, and along with lots of volunteers. I'm just give you a quick, I have sent this on to, well, sorry Nick, I didn't have your email. I sent it on to Mary, Mary sent it on to Nick. So it is fairly long. What the Mad Cat did, I managed to get them some funding from Town Council, my events committee, the mayor and various other people, and I think it was nearly £2,000, which obviously they were grateful for. In March, they delivered 344 hampers of dry goods, including biscuits, crisps, sweets, desserts, stuffing, soup, etc., vegetables, etc. We also delivered 250 frozen Christmas meals, each with Christmas puddings. The funding we received from various people supported the creation of both the hampers and the meals. We had over 40 volunteering hours from people who did the deliveries. Neil Wade Academy, supported by the dry goods collection at the Christmas food appeal. March Quality Meats, that's a local butcher. For every £5 we put in, they doubled it, and the same with the veg man in the Saturday at market. As a separate project with 21 Neil Wade Academy pupils, we ran a cooking at home pilot, which was quite exciting for them. Each young person received a bag of ingredients to make a full meal and dessert for their family, with the corresponding to recipes for 3 weeks. Again, this was really successful. The young people and their families loved it. All 21 want to continue, and we have funding to roll this out this year for 120 young people for a 6-week period. The Fenland Youth Advisory Board have taken on food poverty, and as an area they want to focus on, they are creating a series of workshops for secondary young people to help break down the stigma around food poverty and the language that is used. They also want to get involved with social supermarkets once this is up and running. This is something we're working with FACT so that people can actually go there. We have the 2 fridges which we got from PEC. We're now just working out how they can actually run the supermarket, and they are creating a website to include healthy recipes, information sources, and help for people. And they're committed to some of their own commissioning budget to this. And I'll say, you know, I have to say grateful thanks to the young people. They've really put themselves up front, willing to help. The unfortunate thing is our food banks are actually closed at this time due to lockdown. That doesn't mean to say they're not operating. They're actually operating, they're actually delivering. But once we get the actual FACT supermarket up, it's not selling things. Stuff will get donated, and people who need food, you know, can come in 5 days a week and get it. So grateful thanks to the amount of people who are out there doing a fantastic job.
Thank you very much, Jan. Excellent work. Any questions for Jan? I forgot to ask any questions for Liz as well. So anybody have anything to raise before we move on to Elisa? No, great, thank you. Elisa, anything you'd like to report from Cambridge City?
Oh, thank you very much. So things are starting to move, not yet quickly, but they are moving, and you know, they are gathering pace, and that is very good. On Cambridgeshire Local, I mean, as you know, we have some challenges in terms of adapting Cambridgeshire Local to something that would work properly in Cambridge City, and that isn't going to be the same as anything else in the other districts. So that's requiring a bit of discussions, but I am pleased to say that those discussions are now taking place. We've got a meeting planned, which I'm very much looking forward to, and I'm going to take all the notes in the world. But I've spoken to Paul, who I love very much. Paul is great. And we agree that we have to absolutely have very clear in our mind before we kickstart any sort of ready-made Cambridgeshire Local initiative in Cambridge City. We absolutely have to agree on a way of working that actually suits them, because this is a very exciting time for them. I mean, I have to say this is the most exciting time for me as a community champion since the role was created, because I finally got resources. I can tell Cambridge City, here it is, use it. Use it in some way that will make your work with communities, which is already very good, enhance it in a way that accords with our priorities, which really do align a lot more than misaligned, if they misalign at all in that sense. But basically, you know, we are all agreed that this is what we should be working towards, and I'm very pleased to say that we are starting to work towards that. I've had very constructive discussions with Councillor Anna Smith, and I look forward to taking part in all of the meetings in which they'll have me. I mean, I will literally crash any meeting. I mean, I absolutely want to contribute as much as I possibly can. But, you know, people need to really get the best out of this, because this is resource that will really help. So I look forward to that, and I look forward to having more progress on this to update at the next time. And until then, I continue to work very well with Paul. I have seen, although I do get I get confused about these, but I do think they now have a person that will take over from Paul from April or potentially March. I've seen in the papers, and I will look forward to meeting them and seeing what we can do with Cambridge City together.
Thank you, Elisa. Thanks very much for all the work you're doing. I know how proactive you're being, so that's really great. Any questions for Elisa? No, all good stuff. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to our community champions. So we move on to item 7, which is the agenda plan. Adrian, any updates for the agenda plan, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to confirm that we're not expecting any formal committee business at February, but we, as mentioned earlier, would like to use that time instead for a very interactive session on social mobility. And also linked to that earlier item, if members are content, will include an item on all future agendas on social mobility for a formal social mobility report. Other than that, no changes, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions on the agenda plan, members? No? Okay, thank you very much indeed. So thank you for all attending and watching this meeting, which I will now declare closed, although I'd like to remind committee that we will now have a private training workshop. So thank you very much. Meeting closed.